The broadcast media who habitually lied about Donald Trump, who for 8 solid years did everything possible to whip up hate and hysteria against Trump, well, they were eager to blame him for almost being killed. Here is ABC.
You point out those statements from J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy. Of course, President Trump and his supporters have contributed to this violent rhetoric as well.
Well, absolutely, George. We were just looking back this morning at some of the things that former President Trump has said. He warned last March of potential death and destruction if he were charged by the Manhattan District Attorney. Our country is being destroyed as they tell us to be peaceful. Trump in January warned of bedlam in the country if the criminal charges against him succeeded. And of course, in March, he said, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That will be the least of it. He said he was partly joking and that was taken out of context. But those are indeed his words.
Just shameless victim blaming and gaslighting there by ABC. By the way, that bloodbath comment was about the car industry. It's all on tape. You can watch it for yourself. ABC is, of course, lying, misleading. This is the same organisation that just paid a massive settlement to Trump, not a big enough price for deliberate dishonesty. And yes, George Stephanopoulos was at the centre of that case. But back to the reporting after the assassination attempt. Not only did they seek to blame Donald Trump for almost being killed, but I wonder if they can find a way to perhaps blame his supporters. Maybe mention January 6 again.
Supporters are certainly in some parts angry, and let's remember January 6th. In so many ways for the campaign, January 6th will probably be in the background after yesterday's event. This is a very difficult time for this campaign. I'm sure this week in Milwaukee that President Trump will highlight this.
Just pathetic gutter reporting there. Now let's go to the footage. This was shot by one of the rally attendees. This is the immediate aftermath. It's astonishing footage.
The president's been shot. Oh no. No. Either that or they're covering. We don't know. Either that or they're covering him. We love you. We love you, President Trump. We love you. We love you, President Trump. We love you. Yes. 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 We love you, President Trump. No. No, he's shot. He's shot.
Joining me now is journalist Batya Ungar-Sargon, author of Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. It's just astonishing footage, that extraordinary history-altering moment. What are your thoughts as you reflect on that day?
Thank you so much for having me, Rita. I have to admit, I got teary-eyed seeing that. I had never seen it from that angle before. And you can hear the utter anguish in the voices of the people shooting it and the people around them, because of course when he went down they didn't know if he had been killed. And on the one hand, it was so completely dangerous for him to stand up again, but the fact that he insisted on doing that, on showing his supporters that he was alive and he was okay and saying those famous words, fight, 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 it really showed you the mettle of this person. And whatever we thought we knew about Donald Trump, I think in that moment we all saw a side of him, a kind of heroism and a leadership and an attachment to the well-being of the nation that I've never seen from another leader in my lifetime. The thing that made him take his own life in his hands for the second time and endanger himself was the desire to prevent, I think, mass stampede at the rally itself. And he has spoken very proudly of how proud he is of his supporters, that nobody ran, that everybody sort of waited to see what had happened, but also the desire to prevent violence in the streets of America. God forbid the assassin had succeeded. So truly an amazing, amazing moment. And Thank you for playing those clips from ABC. I had forgotten what it was like during the campaign to just listen to them lie and lie and lie and lie about him. And thank God the country feels like it's in a really different place right now. I mean, they still try to do that, but no one is buying it at all. So we're really in a different moment.
Well, yeah, the media's credibility is in the toilet and it deserves to be there because they have disgraced themselves consistently for 8 solid years, longer than that. Now, what about the assassin here? And he did kill a man on that day. He didn't succeed in killing Donald Trump. That miraculous just head turn at that last millisecond saved his life. But Thomas Matthew Crooks, what do we know about him by now? It's been a year. What do we know about his family, his motivations, his digital footprint? Is there any information that we can look at and understand why he did this?
We know nothing about him. I haven't seen any reporting to expand on what little we learned really in the days after. There is almost nothing known about this person, his motivations, his life, what led him to do this, to do this absolutely horrific thing, which of course took Corey Cooper-Martini's life.
Yes.
At the rally. And I also will never forget, he was a firefighter. And at the RNC, the Republican National Convention, which was really just days after the assassination attempt, the president was still wearing the bandage on his ear. When he first came out on stage, it was the 4th day of the RNC. I will never forget this. He had asked the family if he could have Corey's firefighter uniform. And he had that on stage with him. And before he began to speak, he walked over to it and he just sort of held it. It was a really, really moving moment because I think what he was trying to say was, I was saved by the grace of God. And he wanted to make much of that, of how he felt that he was called for a second term, saved for a purpose, saved by God in order to save America. But he didn't want to celebrate on the fresh grave of this American hero. It was a really moving moment.
It was such a poignant moment. And again, I remember the media's treatment of it. Right here in Australia, we had the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, leftist publications, going with the notion that Corey's surname was misspelt on his uniform. Now, that was his real uniform. It was misspelt on the real uniform, but they made it sound like it was some sort of a mistake, some sort of disrespect from the Trump camp to have done that, as if it was some sort of a prop rather than the man's real uniform, which his family had allowed the Trump camp to use. The media's reporting on this has been, shameful. But I want to ask you about the police response to Secret Service agents who were there on the day. We know a number of them have been recently suspended. But again, do we have any clarity on why Donald Trump was allowed to take the stage when there was a known threat that was unresolved? Now, I'll just take you through this timeline quickly. Secret Service were alerted at 5:46 p.m. of a suspicious person. Now, Trump arrived at the rally site standing behind the stage at 6 p.m. Then we have officers losing sight of this suspect who's on the rooftop. And then, Batya, they still allowed Donald Trump to take to the stage with this known threat. He went on stage at 6:05 and it wasn't until 6:12 p.m. that he was shot. So at 5:46, we knew there was a suspicious person. They lose sight of him just after 6 o'clock, and they still allow Donald Trump to take to the stage. To call the police Secret Service response here ham-fisted, I think, is an understatement.
It certainly seems that way, although I'm going to take a page out of the president's playbook. Every time he has been asked this very good question, he has sort of refused to slag off on them and has said, it's a very hard job and all of my team was good and I admire them and I admire law enforcement, I admire the Secret Service. He has never allowed himself to publicly criticize what happened on that day. So I'm going to follow in his lead and simply admire the heroism. Although I think these are all very legitimate questions that I hope one day are answered.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to other issues. The New York Post is reporting that billionaire George Soros' Open Society Foundation has funneled $37 million to the Working Families Party and other lefty groups that are backing Zoran Mamdani, the hard-left socialist frontrunner to be the next mayor of New York. What do you make of this donation? It's not terribly surprising, but that Zoran would take it. I mean, I thought he didn't even want billionaires to exist, let alone fund his campaign.
It's a great point, Rita. It explains a lot about why a party that calls itself the Working Families Party has so much more in common with the over-credentialed college elites with their trust fund socialism and their sort of Nepo baby economics, than it does with what actual working class Americans, working class New Yorkers, Black New Yorkers, and Hispanic New Yorkers actually want. Excuse me. You have this sort of cultural divide in which working class people want good jobs that pay well, and the elites want a serf caste of illegals to do all the work and themselves to get free things like, free rent and free groceries and free buses and so forth, so that they could stay at home and make podcasts. And that point of view, having an open border and a welfare state, being anti-America and anti-Israel, this is very much what the Soros Foundation and other leftist billionaire foundations and nonprofits push. It's because they swim in the same waters as the NGO staffers, who are the same types of this over-credentialed college elite who make up the left today. And so they like to pretend that this is like working class politics, working class populism, but it really isn't. It's this sort of trust fund socialism, and it's very much at odds with what working people actually want. But I saw that Soros donation. I thought, oh, that makes a lot more sense now.
Now, what do you make of those who condemn criticism of Soros as anti-Semitic? I think it's one of the more absurd claims we hear, but it's nevertheless popular among some in the media and in academia.
Oh, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, if you're sitting there and you're going to give me a list of all of the people you think are the enemies of your country, and it's 5 people or 5 billionaires and they're all Jews, I might start to think, okay, I mean, this person might have a problem with Jews. But one person, of course it's not. He is actually representative of very anti-nation state, anti-democratic policies. He believes explicitly in open borders. He's very clear about that. So to say that it's anti-Semitic to criticize him is absolutely absurd. He's taken a very unpopular position, and the fact of his lineage, his ethnicity, should not be able to shield him from criticism. That's just as racist as saying that you should criticize him because he's Jewish. So I think that that's nonsense.
Absolutely. Before you go, the Epstein saga, Jeffrey Epstein, is one that's not going to go away. I think this is the Trump administration's first big mistake in this second term. I want to play you a clip of former Trump lawyer Alan Dershowitz saying he knows there's a list.
I know for a fact documents are being suppressed, and they're being suppressed to protect individuals. I know the names of the individuals. I know why they're being suppressed. I know who's suppressing them, but I'm bound by confidentiality from a judge and cases, and I can't disclose what I know. But I hand to God, I know the names of people whose files are being suppressed in order to protect them, and that's wrong.
Just out of curiosity, without names, are these politicians, business leaders, both?
They're everything. Batya, can Donald Trump leave this issue unresolved? It's clearly not a priority for him. It seems to be an irritation, but it's certainly an issue that the base wants properly addressed. This seems like a cover-up.
I have to say I'm with the president on this. I don't know why people are so obsessed with this story. I think maybe the influencers who kind of stake their reputations by making podcasts about this and talking about this a lot feel very strongly about it. But honestly, Rita, I don't think the average American is thinking about the Jeffrey Epstein file. I think they're thinking about whether groceries are going to go up. I think they're thinking about whether they're going to be able to afford presents for Christmas. I think that they're really focused on.
But can't we do both, Batya? Can't we do both? Can't we address those big issues like inflation, cost of living, the border crisis, but also try to get to the bottom of what rich and very influential people were benefiting from the sex trafficking that was happening? It seems like the swamp is still in effect, and if you're rich enough, if you are well connected enough, you can get away with the most hideous of crimes.
I personally don't think there's any evidence that the sex trafficking of minors went much beyond Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. She went to trial, and in her trial, there was a lot of discovery. And one of the main witnesses for the larger conspiracy that they used the sex trafficking of minors to entrap all of these people Alan Dershowitz is talking about turned out to have fabricated part of her story. So, you know, of course, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were sex trafficking young girls for their own disgusting pleasure. And I'm glad that she's in prison for that and that he seems to have, you know, paid a price for it. But the larger conspiracy that there's a list, when this was actually brought up in a court of law where you had an adversarial process looking at the facts, there did not seem to be much of a there. There were two business leaders who were married, who had for some reason paid off Jeffrey Epstein, but it was never alleged that they had paid him off over the young girls. It was more just because they were married, they wanted this kept secret. So to me, like, the thing that made him a monster was the pedophilia, was the young girls, was the against their consent. But everything that goes beyond the two of them seems to me, from what the evidence that I have seen that came up in an adversarial, legitimate process in courts of law, seem to be other stuff. So to me, there's a great piece in Compact Magazine by Michael Tracy. It's incredible. He goes through this point by point by point. But you know what? If you're bothered by this, anyone who's bothered by this should keep pushing for it. I totally support that, and I totally respect it. I just don't see this breaking apart the MAGA base.
No, I agree with you 100% that this is not going to fracture Donald Trump's support. There are people who are upset about it, but I don't think they're going to suddenly become Democrats or stop supporting the MAGA ideals. But I just think there's so many unanswered questions just about Jeffrey Epstein himself, his influence, how he came to accumulate the enormous wealth he did. But that's a discussion for another day. Batya Ungar-Sargon, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you so much, Rita. God bless.